This is Melissa, and today is June the 11th, 2023. This is Redux number 113. It is from October 12, 2007, Alan's talk on RBN Radio, Meet Your New Spouse, Rutting with Robots, Clankers for Wankers. And the title says a lot there. Alan gets into how having a sexual relationship with a robot is being pushed, and he talks about how that is promoted through novels and in other forms of entertainment. This is a good talk for a lot of reasons, but I was speaking with someone the other day who said, when you think about everything that's going on in culture right now, what is being promoted, targeting the children with sexual imagery and the transgender agenda aimed and directed at them. And you think about what Alan often said about how before 9/11, the international censors got together and said, okay, so we have made homosexuality in movies acceptable. It's time to push forward bestiality and intergenerational sex. And that would be good to remind listeners of that. They can see the progression towards where we are today. Well, I cannot find those articles. Some years back, I did a little online search for them. And they've possibly gone down the memory hole. But Alan said that right before 9/11, a professor in the U.S. and a professor in Canada had made that remark after coming back from an international film censors gathering. And what I finally did was a keyword search with the parameter of just the month. I did the whole year before 9/11, and I came up with some interesting articles. But I narrowed that down to just August of 2001. And what was revealing to me was the sheer quantity of articles that had to do with movie rating, sex and violence portrayed in movies. And there were some scholarly studies that came out at that time, and then there were more popular fluff pieces. One in particular was in August of 2001 when New Yorker magazine covered Jack Valenti, who was the CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America, a very interesting organization. I looked around to see, what was going on in the news that kind of tied in to this theme of how things are promoted. And then I went back to the articles, and some of them were long. The one I'll put up from the New Yorker magazine, which is a profile piece covering Jack Valenti, is really interesting. And it led me to a whole line of inquiry, because Jack Valenti, if the Motion Picture Association of America is a lobby group lobbying Congress in Washington, D.C. on behalf of the film industry. I think at the time that it was created in 1922, it was representing 5 major studios. When this article was written in 2001, it was representing 7 major studios. And I think today it claims to represent all of the major studios, plus Netflix and a few other entities. But what was fascinating to me was the intertwining between Hollywood and Washington, D.C. And we've heard Alan talk about how the Pentagon has representatives who will work on a Hollywood movie. They'll work with the producers, and they'll give them themes that are going to be covered in the movies, and input on whether a fighter jet is the right fighter jet for the period piece. But it is more, it's a little bit more sinister than that. But when I looked into the Motion Picture Association and saw this total, there's no other way to say it, but marriage between Hollywood and Washington, D.C., and going through history from the very beginning, from the very first person who headed up the Motion Picture Association and his connections down to the present, it was very illuminating to me, and I thought that I would prefer to write about this than speak about it, because there's so many connections that are interesting, and when I take the time to put it down on paper, I can be a little bit more detailed. But what that told me, how the politicians and the CEOs of this agency use the stars to promote causes, use the stars to attend dinner party fundraisers for their favorite politicians, it gave a whole new dimension to what Alan would say about how stars are put out there so that we follow them, follow the stars. And I just did a little bit of looking around, okay, who's promoting what? And sure enough, just last month, there's an actress who's been in a lot of movies who said quite proudly that all 3 of her adult kids identify as queer. So she has 3 children, and they're all queer. And she went on to say that she did a telethon called Drag Isn't Dangerous. The woman's name is Marcia Gay Harden. She called anti-drag policies fear-based. What's happening right now is wrong. What drives me is my children are all queer. My eldest child is non-binary, my son is gay, my youngest is fluid. And they're my kids, and they teach me every day. So she's talking about the anti-drag. She said it's spreading that kind of fear and hatred among other people. I believe this country will fight that, she said. Gay is here to stay. Drag is here to stay. Donate what you can and join us in spreading the love. And then I looked to see, I don't really go to the movies or watch television, just, do a little marathon now and again to get the theme of something that might be promoted. But I looked to see who were the top box office earners in the actors and actresses. And sure enough, the actress who is biggest at the box office right now also has a movie that's being released in a month that is just completely pushing the envelope of what would have been considered normal a decade ago or 2 decades ago. And it's quite clear that stars and their movie vehicles are not just used for putting the programming across. That predictive programming is so important. It is essential. But the other component of that is when that so-called star is out in public, what do they say? How do they say it? What is their response? Just like this woman, all 3 of my children are queer, and it's a good thing. And when I was looking at one of the past heads, one of the past CEOs of the Motion Picture Association, there was a little fluff piece where the politician Ted Kennedy was talking about the other politician who ended up running the Motion Picture Association, and another famous actress that they were having dinner with, and a quite frank, candid sexual conversation that occurred between the 3 of them. It was the kind of conversation that nowadays would have been a Me Too complaint by the actress. But what you see there, all of the Me Too aside, and the young women now whose cry is feminism and don't do that to me and don't do that to other women, what you have is an ancient system that most of these women will have known when they got involved in it, where they have to know on some level what they're being used for. And I think what's going on with the Me Too was just women finding some kind of peace with what they decided to become involved in. That's all. It changes nothing. It changes nothing. The movies that are produced are there to contaminate culture. They will always be there to contaminate culture. They will be weaponized to move us and our sympathies in a specified direction. So I will put up some articles that I found that tie into this. This was a really good talk that Alan did not just cover this, but he covered aerial spraying and crisis scenarios and habitat areas, what they would do to get you into a habitat area, and all of this we're seeing right now. So I will supply you with stories. I will write something that will, at some point between now and when I upload, that will dive just a little bit deeper in the intersection between politics and Hollywood. And what I was left thinking is there's not really a strong division. You can say, Alan used to point out that politicians and actors shared in common that definition of the attention-seeking psychopath, the hysterical attention-seeking psychopath, and that came from the book Ponerology, that pointed out the high incidence of psychopathy in various professions. And I believe that there were more psychopaths in politics than in the entertainment field. But there is no doubt from this little foray that I did that Hollywood and Washington, D.C. are much more united than I ever knew. So here is Alan Watt, Meet Your New Spouse, Rutting with Robots, Clankers for Wankers, October 12, 2007. Enjoy. Thank you.
I'm Alan Watt, and this is Cutting Through the Matrix. It is October the 12th, 2007. For newcomers, as always, I suggest you look into cuttingthroughthematrix.com for lots of free talks you can download on the past histories of how we got to where we are today and where we're going. And I mentioned the different groups and organizations that are behind it. And there really are organizations, very organized indeed, with foundations backing them up that last for many, many generations. And that's why they can plan something even hundreds of years ago and make it happen. The big builders are at work all the time. For those who speak the other languages of Europe, look into alanwattsentientsentinel.eu and get the downloadable transcripts in the various tongues of Europe. Now, so much is happening all the time, and people tell me that they're bored. They're bored surfing the internet, which I don't do because I've got so much going on inside my head. The people who are bored going through the internet don't realize that they're being taken on a magical mystery tour where anything is possible, because predictive programming moved from the novels into the science fiction movies, into regular movies, and into dramas on television, and now it's into the internet. And some of the biggest sites out there on Atlantis and so on are not run by just little individuals passing the time. You can tell by looking at them that there are big groups of people behind it, because they must keep you mystified. And when you're mystified and intrigued, you get dragged in very easily into possibility thinking, what is possible, and that's called predictive programming. You find that you can go into all areas of what will come, never realizing there are 1,000 directions that humankind could go if they were left alone, but we're guided along a certain path so that the next step and the next step and the next step seems quite logical to us, judging on what we've got already. And that's called predictive programming. A very important term coined by Tavistock Institutes in London that really helped start off this scientific type of technocracy using psychology on vast amounts of people. Now, what they also do is fund novelists, the big novelists that suddenly become famous and are kept up there riding on a blast of hot air for a long time before they fall down. But those novelists, especially in science fiction, the Arthur C. Clarkes and the Isaac Asimovs that churned out all the books on robotics and the interaction of robots that would come with humans and all of this kind of stuff, that's predictive programming again. It's not because they have tremendous imaginations that they do this and they get away with it. It's because they're led in, because they belong to the futurist society. And the futurist society is a conglomerate of big foundations, think tanks, who bring in the authors and finance them, tell them little bits of the truth and tell them to write stories around those truths. I'll be back in a few moments after these messages with more on this particular topic. Hi, folks. I want to work back with Cutting Through the Matrix and just talking about predictive programming and how those things which fascinate us, imagination, is used against us by dishing us out certain stories with ideas embedded in them that lead to predictability. So when the real thing comes along, we don't think there's anything odd about it. Now, we saw this with Isaac Asimov, who wrote all the books on robots and I, Robot, and I think they made it into a movie eventually, and various other ones on the laws of robots. So here again, the lawyers are going to make a killing when they bring in robots with artificial intelligence. So then they always add to them to layers and layers of lawyers with every new invention that comes along. But Asimov's job was to get us used to the idea that these things will eventually be in the workplace, and we've seen that, of course, through the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the auto factories. And they want to bring them into your homes, etc. But now they're going a step further, you see. Now that they've successfully pretty well destroyed the family for most people, and even the bonding between generations, that also had to go. That's been very successful because grandma and grandpa are dumped off in the old folks' home where they exit the world rather quickly once they're inside. And we find that the youngsters are brought up by the state. The state gives them their scientifically designed indoctrinations so that any parent that's there will have less inputs to the child. The child will run off the child's back like water off a duck. And that's what Bertrand Russell would refer to when he says the scientific indoctrination from kindergarten onwards will make it impossible to contaminate the child by the parents with their old-fashioned ideas. That's been successful. So everyone's been divided and conquered, you see. And as we all think we're free in the little group that we belong to, that we're in, we're being managed by Big Brother at the top, who's now become the new husband even. He's a big, powerful husband of the women, for instance. When Bush shouts out that he's going to protect everyone, take away your rights, but protect them, give them free daycare and all this kind of stuff. You just compare what he's saying to what the communist planks were, the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And it's all been done because now the state is Big Brother, he's Big Father too, and no one else can stand against him because there's no group left in the natural fashion to stand up to them. And so they've been very successful with that. They said they'd have to eradicate the family. The men themselves are too busy watching sports and swigging their chemical beers to really take much notice in what's happening around them. They hear that, they're very depressed because they have no function anymore. But here's an article that's come up now to do with robots, because they're looking forward to the next step, you see, before they make the new man or hermaphrodite or whatever it happens to be to take the place of us. And it's to do with creating new robots that will be a sexual partner. Now, you think of all the play toys they introduced and made rather popular among certain peoples over the years, and all the masses of porno on the internet, which they made sure they never liquidated. In fact, that was the first thing anyone heard about the internet. There'd be lots of porn in it to make sure that everybody went into it. And it's still on the go, of course. Heavily funded porno sites, no doubt about it. Here's an item from Breitbart.com. I think it's in the Netherlands, and it says Maastricht, Netherlands, October 11th. University of Maastricht in the Netherlands is awarding a doctorate to a researcher who wrote a paper on marriage between humans and robots. David Levy, a British artificial intelligence researcher at the college, wrote in his thesis, "Intimate relationships with artificial partners, the trends in robotics and shifting attitudes on marriage are likely to result in sophisticated robots that will eventually be seen as suitable marriage partners." Now, I can remember when all the big dating services started up and they started putting their ads on television and so on, and you just simply punched in supposedly what you wanted and what you were like, and you'd find a suitable marriage partner. Well, here's the end product of it, you see. They're going to give you something that isn't real at all. And so Levy here has got his doctorate on this darn thing that's been given to him, obviously, because he's in the know. I'm sure he'll be related to the guys in Hollywood who gave him a few tips on what to write about for his thesis. Levi's conclusion was based on about 450 publications in the fields of psychology, sexology, sociology. There's lots of ologies around these days, have you noticed? Lots of ologies. Robotics, materials, science, artificial intelligence, gender studies, and computer-human interaction. Very important part, the human and computer interaction. This is the interfacing they've been experimenting with over the years, even from the early days of Aldous Huxley, where they want you to be in the internet, in the matrix itself, and for the outside world they'll give you a robotic partner. So what they're doing is severing the ties between people altogether. That's the real intent of all this. No real human contact. You'll be a battery for the matrix. And it says here too, to continue, the thesis examines human attitudes towards affection, love, and sexuality. Imagine loving a robot. All you do is buy them some hydraulic oil once in a while and charge their batteries. Love and sexuality, and concluded that the findings are just as applicable to human interaction with robots for the future as they are to the relationships between humans of today. And so that's from United Press International. And so here they go with the next step of depersonalization of the individual until we're all dealing just with robots in an awakened state and in a complete fantasy when we're in the matrix. That's where they're heading with all of this. And it's a step-by-step process that was discussed a long, long, long time ago, because even the old black and white silent movies, they made movies about this very thing. And here it is. They never change their agenda. And these characters here, like Levi, they don't dream up this kind of stuff. They're given access to information, just like the writers are given access to information, so they can put the ideas in our heads that somehow it's inevitable. And the more it's parroted by media and gets trendy and comes out through magazines and little documentaries, the more we'll come to think it's quite a normal step to take until we're totally isolated from every other human being on the planet. And then you're totally conquered. That's been the dream of tyrants for ages. The problem is most of the sheeple, and I'm sure you know lots of them, will go for this kind of thing, a made-to-order robot, the perfect spouse. And as I say, all you need is a bucket of hydraulic oil and a good recharger for the batteries. And no doubt you'll have to rent them and be renting forever. And once you get addicted to whatever turns you on, you won't be able to turn it off. You'll just keep paying and paying.